As they presented me already, my name is Besnik Leka. I work for Care International in the Balkans. And I'm part as well of the Men Engage Europe, and as well I work for other organizations that volunteer that deal with around gender equality topics and working with men and challenging norms of the traditional norms of masculinity. So the project that I'm about to present, as you see it in the slide, is called Young Men Initiative for Gender Equality. The project has started back in 2007 in the Balkan region. So as Care International, we have been working with both men and women as it is part of one of our strategies in promoting gender equality and women empowerment. But for the last decade, our focus was higher around young men and fathers, as we did notice not much presence of men being involved in such topics, and we thought that this would be very useful to involve more men to talk about gender equality and fathers, since we believe this is everybody's responsibility. So our focus our aim was to enable positive and peaceful societies around the Balkan region, as I mentioned, in Serbia, Kosovo, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And with our initial goal was to focus on promoting gender equality. And the second part was on violence prevention, sexual reproductive health and rights. And recently, in the last 3 years, we started to as well learn from our experience. We were focusing as well on preventing violent extremism, as this is a new topic to us, but at the same time, it is a big concern in our region, especially knowing that from our region we had a lot of youth that joined violent extremism. Our target groups initially were like boys and young men. At the same time, we had young women in the projects, 14 to 19 years old. Our focus was to work mostly with vocational technical high schools, as these schools were known with higher or dominance of violence in these schools, but at the same time we had a higher presence of men because of the, I would say, gender stereotypes around the professions, such as in vocational technical schools, we have a higher domination of young men rather than young women. At the same time, one of our goals was as well to work with teachers and school staff, which I'll explain later, how this got incorporated in working with ministries of education. At the same time, like we have been working with NGO activists and doing trainings, but at the same time with pedagogy students and journalists and other organizations in working capacity building, and the public, the government sector and Ministry of Education. So why do we work with young men? Like before I talk, as Katarina mentioned, we'll have a pool, if it's on the slide, the questions that I would like to ask. Which of the below following do you think is one of the main causes of early death in young men's lives? So you can have a vote. You have options. One is interpersonal violence, drug abuse and alcohol, suicide, car accidents. So I'll give you a few minutes to vote for this. Okay, so I see like different votes going in different points. But I would like to state that, thank you for voting. I would like to state that actually all of them are the reasons and the causes of early death in young men's life. Now the question is, how does this relate to gender equality? But one of the things as well that we have been working with young men for the last 10 years, we have seen that very often young men in patriarchal societies are not able to share their emotions and talk freely because of the expectation that society has towards them. We have an attempt of suicide higher around young women, But when it comes to young men, usually the action is taken all the way to till the end. And we see that this has a lot to do with them not being able to express their emotions, them not being able to talk freely what they go through, and how sometimes the expectation that society has towards young men, they are not able to fulfill those expectations, which very often this leads to depression, and then later to a suicide rate. As well, the interpersonal violence, which I saw it had some votes, that is another very common thing that we see in the Balkan region especially, that this leads to a lot of increase in violence based on the interpersonal violence men towards other men. One of the reasons is very often that they state is this the need to protect the honor of the family and their society. And the lack of men being able to express their emotions, what they go through, often leads to deconstructive actions that they take that leads to violence. So how do we work? We basically, since we have been working in schools for more than 10 years, as I said, in vocational technical schools, and we have been testing our program. Recently, our program got accredited by Ministries of Education in the all Balkan region, and we have developed a toolkit, which it is available online, but I just would like to share. It's pretty thick toolkit with a lot of materials, all our experience that we have been using in the schools with our program. We realize that it's important to provide the schools with the full program in case they want to adapt the program and as well carry on in their schools. So our toolkit, it contains a manual, which it has around 40 workshops. At the same time, it has guidelines for fundraising for schools and how to implement a campaign and how to do a research, and which I will stop now to talk a bit of the research. While we were implementing the program in schools, because our program was being tested, we wanted to learn ourselves a lot more than society from us, because it was a piloting program. And then we did a baseline research in schools, and then after 3 years of the program being implemented, we did an end line. And then we were able to measure the impact of the program that had in the young men's and lives, and the young girls' lives as well, young women's lives. And then we realized these changes in attitudes, behavior, and their beliefs, and how the violence, gender-based violence, but as well interpersonal violence, has reduced in these schools. Now, since the program has been, as I said again, more than 10 years, we wanted to do a follow-up step with young men that left high school so they continued their education. So we have developed a program for fathers and fathers-to-be. Our goal was to work with fathers-to-be, and the topics were around family planning, household division, caregiving. But at the same time, part of our program, which we have developed and adapted, we got it from Promundo, an organization in Brazil, and Men Care, that were supporting the program together with Men Engage. We have adapted to the local context to see in what way it's the best use for our society. So the program P, as you see in the screen, for fathers, is to engage young men in fatherhood and caregiving and maternal and child health. It has 3 sections. First section, it's as well related to recommendations for professionals who provide parental care. At the same time, we have recommendation for the health providers in the clinics, since we know that often when couples go and when they expect a baby, it's very important that the doctors that they visit, they have these gender lenses advices which they give. In our society, very often, like when the couple is expecting a baby, usually mother goes with sister-in-law or with mother-in-law. Like, fathers don't partake much at the first steps of the pregnancy. And our goal is to encourage both fathers and mothers to be together and follow the first footsteps, because like if the fathers get used to and get involved from early care of their baby and the family, they will be involved throughout their life, and at the same time how this impacts them. In the middle, we have as well a manual for, it's called Gender Sensitive Training for the Media. So since we use a lot of media, we decide to promote our activities. We often lacked the way media have reported about our program. As much as we want to use media as a tool to promote our program, sometimes they lack, and by using some sexist language or discriminatory language, no matter what the activity is. And we had these cases with media, which we had to react. And then we decided to do a manual for training for media on gender-sensitive language use. Very often when the media reports and we read reports about gender-based violence, you often see this tendency of media and some journalists and editors where like they leave some room by justifying did the woman deserve to be beaten or to be or the violence to be caused towards her. So that's why we thought of developing this manual where we will be training them on having these gender lenses and being sensitive to the gender topics when they report. So as I mentioned, one of our strongest components are our campaigns. Now you see on the screen the program Y. As I said, we have been working for a decade with towards focusing more around young men. And this was an eye-opener for us to see the invisibility of men suffering from patriarchal societies. And we believe that as much as feminism needs men, when we had the campaign He for She, we believe that men need feminism too. And men can learn a lot on how to challenge these patriarchal norms where everybody in society would benefit. So just last year, we started working with mixed gender groups, with both young men and young women. Our campaigns have been called most like it's called BMN, and then we would change the slogans with like BMN show emotions, BMN fall in love, because again these were the topics that men were afraid kind of to touch upon. So again, some examples of our from our media. We have, for example, one of the things that we did see that where do our boys get mostly influenced were they were influenced from rappers, from music industry, from VIPs and people that are involved in sports. And very often, sometimes we lack to have a good role models of these people that are in these fields where we would use them to promote such values. So then in Kosovo, we had an example. We used one of the rappers, and we talked with this rapper, and then we ended up producing a song and the lyrics, which it relates to young men's life and promoting more peaceful masculinity. So with this rapper, we managed to create a video clip, and then we made this song very famous by spreading and sharing the song. And like for a very short period of time, it got more than 2 million clicks and views. And later, after like 3 months, we got 5 more rappers approaching us and wanting to do such songs with such topics. And then this was very interesting to see that, with small action that we took with this rapper, we were able to kind of impact music industry, not to say change, because change is a big word for music industry, because we still see what sometimes gets promoted, but at least we're happy that after the song that we created, a few more rappers actually followed our footsteps and created songs with very interesting values and not as they would do before, using discriminatory or sexist language. Another thing that we is one of our strong components is as well the play, which is called Macho Man. This one they did the young man with our partner organization in Belgrade, where this play became very famous, and more than 20,000 people and 112 times was played this play around the globe with English subtitles. I don't know, maybe some of you were lucky enough to have seen it, but it's still touring around, so maybe you will have a chance later to see it. Another small pictures we see here, there is a football tournament that was organized for girls, and our boys in the project were the cheerleaders. So this was an idea that came from young men, because what they learn in school from our manuals, the idea is for them to create a campaign and put in practice. So they did a football tournament for girls, and the boys were the cheerleaders, and this got, again, a lot of media attention, seeing that, how we decided to change these roles and try to promote, a diverse group where everybody can play and everybody can be a cheerleader. So Yeah, and then we have some other campaigns. One of them is that we have been targeting bystanders, which is called React as Human, because from a lot of research that has been done, we have seen that around 70% of violence happens in front of people's eyes. So our idea was to engage bystanders. So one of the campaigns is called React as Human. And then we made different slogans that we put these posters, and we created awareness in the community, in the streets, where we wanted to encourage bystanders to raise an alarm, to report the cases of violence without putting themselves at risk, but at the same time, being cautious, but at the same time, not letting violence happen and leaving it there. Or like as often we say here, if the violence happened between couples, that's a family issue. And that's why people sometimes don't want to get involved. And our idea is like to be involved and to inform like institutions or use any safer way. The other one, it's about Super Dad. This one we have developed as well with our fathers, and we have chosen 3 topics of the campaign with fathers. One of them was like be proud and show it. We wanted to encourage fathers to be proud of their family and show love and care. Because again, through the research shows that fathers that are involved in their young children's lives, they seem to smoke less, drink less, at the same time visit less the therapist. Because again, this emotion sharing with their kids, it's actually beneficial for the fathers at the same time, to be engaged in the family. And another one was like just play, share games, be with your kids, and the third one was like be brave and show affection. This was one of the issues in our fathers group where we work. Many of the fathers said that they are feared to grab their babies or put them in their lap or show love and affection because they get judged and their masculinity is being tested by the society. So this was one of the focus that we have been working as well with fathers, apart from the trainings that we do regularly with them. So another pool and an activity for us. Which one of the below emotions young men express the least in the patriarchal society? So we have anger, love, fear, happiness, and kindness. So which one do you think young men show the least? Okay, so we see that it's around fear and love and kindness, while other people are voting. Actually, fear is one of the least sharing emotions. When we talk to young men, we ask them to rate which of the emotions you would show more freely and which one you would not show or show less. Usually, fear is one of the emotions that they don't show, and the reason is like they're afraid to feel fear. Because again, as men, they always think that they're supposed to be ready to react to different situations. And one of the emotions they show more freely is anger. And again, this has to do because very often they're faced with anger. They see it in media, they see it in the family, they see it in society, they see it in their neighborhood. So this was like one of the reasons we wanted to work with them for them to express their emotions more freely. Now we can imagine if a young man fears to show fear, what do we learn, what they go through. So, as I mentioned, we did baseline and endline. There is this gender index that shows the difference between in the beginning of the project at the end of the project. And this gender index was, gender roles index was mostly related to the household division. At the same time, one of the questions was a woman's most important role is to take care of the home and cook for the family. Changing diapers, bathing, and feeding kids are the mother's responsibility, and a man should have the final word in his home. So again, these are the disagreements where we have from Banja Luka 18 to 26, Pristina 22 to 39. So we have seen this impact that we had in young men's life after 3 years, that they disagree with such statements. Same happens with cooking and cleaning the house. I'm going to skip this because of the timing. So another thing, just quickly to mention, this is another table where we did see rates of sadness, stress, anxiety, and depression and suicidal thoughts from baseline to endline. So this has gone the opposite. And then when we sat and talked with young men why this was not positively impacted, and most of them said that, like, again, in the baseline, they didn't share much of their thoughts. Like when they had suicidal thoughts, they would never share it with anybody. That's why this often happened, that they took the action all the way to the end. But now they were open to share them, and that's why we have an increase in the end line. And before I open for the question, this is the last slide where we have won this Global Education Innovation Award 2 years ago with our Young Man Initiative project. At the same time, we have one global festivals on film, which one of the young men created a film based on his story, how he grew without a father and how he was violent and how later he became the educator towards the other friends. So thank you. I try to keep it short, and I'll be open up for questions if somebody has anything.
Okay, we see a few people are typing. Feel free to ask anything in the chat.
While people are typing, I would just like to say that the website is here, youngmaninitiative.net, where all the manuals, materials, and research that we did and campaigns, they're all available online. You just go to the website, you select English language, and then you go to the resources and you get all the materials. They're open source. Okay, so the first question is by Agnes. What are the biggest challenges since you started the project? I think one of the first challenges was like to engage men to promote gender equality, because it was hard to explain to that privilege, as I say, is invisible for those who have it. So like as a young man, they had some privileges, and it was hard to convince them to join the project. But then we had as well to explain, as I said, the other part, how patriarchy harms men too, and how they should stand against patriarchal societies. So I think being able to introduce the program and getting young men interested in the program, this was a challenge. But then later, because of the changes that they went through, we did see this importance. I mean, other men saw it as important to join the program, and that's why now our program is pretty wide in the region. Yeah, so again, the other question is similar to the first. So again, like to me, my biggest surprise was as well to see how fathers were interested. My first group with fathers, when they joined the program, I thought, okay, they came first time, they were happy, but second time they might not come. And the second time they doubled in the numbers. And I was so happy to see so many fathers join the program. And the second time I gave them some homework. And third time when they came, like, there were some simple homework, like, to show more affections or to cook in the family. And third time when they came, many fathers shared how good it felt to cook for their kids, which, and one of the fathers said, actually, I never told my son I love you. So after 4 years, I took the courage to tell him. So, and he felt so good. So you just have to find the ways and how to introduce the program to them so they show the eagerness. Yeah, so as self-sustainable groups, I mean, as CARE, we work with 8 local partner organizations. We managed to create these resource centers where the young men would go there and spend their time in these local organizations and, develop ideas in the project. But at the same time, as I said, like in schools, we got our program accredited. And in Bosnia and Herzegovina, our program is mandatory. Like Ministry of Education made it mandatory. So 25% of head teachers' classes use our program in schools. So now that's our goal. Like, as I said, we created this toolkit, which right now it has around 600 pages, and we're going to keep on adding materials that we think are interesting for the schools. And we really are hoping we did train a lot of teachers in the region, and now we want slowly this program to pass it on to the schools, and we'll be there to build their capacities. I'll wait, I guess, for a few more questions.
Okay, let's take one more question like this, and then if you have, Besnik will stay for a few until the end of the webinar with us. So if you still have questions for him, you can type in the chat, and he will reply you in the chat. Okay, here is the last question.
This is a very good question. I like it. So I'm going to try to how we came to media. Like in Kosovo, I love to cook. So I was at the MasterChef TV show, and then there was they would offer a prize if you win the whole MasterChef show. And I did not manage to win it, but I went to some levels, and they asked me, "What would you do with money?" I said I would teach boys from the project to cook, and we will go in the street and give food for free, and saying that men can cook too. And then we did it. Even though I did not win the prize, the media loved my idea, so they sponsored the idea. We were around 40 boys that we learned how to cook from our parents. And the next day, for International Human Rights Day, we went in the street and gave food for free and saying, we as men can cook too, let us cook. Because sometimes there is this struggle, should we let men in the kitchen? And then the media went and said, they put a big title saying, be a man club boys or good women chefs. In Albania, we have a word for women and for men, chef. As in English, it's just one word. And then our boys were very much devastated. We're like, and some of them were very emotional. They were like, what we try to do is completely the opposite of what media is saying. So then we had to make phone calls to this media for 2 hours to put the title down. But then they thought this title is interesting and nice for readers. And we're like, no, it's not, because it doesn't represent what we do. And then they changed the title, and we're like, okay, we have to work with media. We have to work with media on gender-sensitive language use. We have to work with media to promote the right values, not to put something that they think is interesting and for like. So this was one of the tricky point where, like, it made us work with media, and this is why sometimes we have these challenges with them. But right now, we have good media that have been trained and that they're following the work and giving good reports.